Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. When I was considering making this video on my sewing table, I realized that there's a lot of things on my sewing table and not all of them are about sewing, and I have a lot to say about it. If you've been with me for a while and you watch this channel, you know that I've recently taken a holiday break from the channel and videos, and this is the first one back. And let me just say, it's a good thing that I took a break, because in the time period that I have been away, in addition to my usual workload, I also had a ton of pharmacy continuing education to do, and found a suspicious mole, which turned out to be melanoma. And so they amputated my right arm and put it back on. Not really, but they did take all of the margins, and the margins of a melanoma are bigger than you think. And so I have an arm that looks a little bit like Frankenstein's bride right now. I also work in a pharmacy that had a pipe burst in that hard freeze that we just got over not too long ago, and flooded the entire pharmacy. And I got the dreaded virus on Christmas Eve. So my Christmas was spent quarantined at home, sick but sewing. And so it's been kind of an eventful time away. And I was thinking about you all, and many of you continued to comment on the channel. Thank you for that. And lots of you sent direct messages and private messages through Instagram and Facebook. And wow, thank you. I feel the love. I hope you all had happy holidays and a wonderful Christmas break. And it just was so meaningful. So I wanted to come back with this video and do an on my sewing table, because that's what I've been working on as much as I could in the middle of all that. But before I get into what I'm actually working on, I wanted to do a big shout out first to Laurie, who in August of 2022 Facebook messaged me. We had several messages back and forth, and she, somewhere in those conversations that we had, those wonderful interactions, said, "Can I send you a piece of fabric? Is that a thing? Is that a thing?" At the time, I did not have a post office box or a mailbox that I could receive things from people. I now do. And so once I got that, I messaged her back, "Okay, it's been a while, but I finally have a mailbox that you can send fabric to me, and I'd be delighted." And she did. And so she sent me this beautiful, just beautiful piece of purple print. And again, for those of you that are familiar with this channel, this is the best because of the whole legend of the purple shirt. And I have a replacement purple shirt, if you recall. So I now have another purple shirt to try to integrate into a project somewhere. And she sent this to me, and I just thought it was so lovely. And her comment was that she could totally imagine it being binding, and I can too. And she sent with it a little note to me on this card. And I don't know if you have already made this connection, but I'm kind of a Pantone person. And I have another one of these in red. I have used it so much that I've worn the glaze off of it. So if I had a doubt that I've found my people, I have found my people. At the same time, roughly the same time, another one of my viewers and friends, Mona, direct messaged me through Instagram and said, "I want to send you some fabric." And I think this is the best thing ever. And so she sent me this fabric, which makes me laugh just thinking about it. I don't know if you can see it. It is capsules and tablets. And so if you're new to this channel and you don't know, I'm a pharmacist. So that is fantastic. I have no idea what project I will make with this, but I am sure I will make good use of both of these. Thank you both. I feel all of the love. I feel so understood, which is like my love language. So thanks to them in the process of considering being on break, except not really being on break, and thinking through the projects that I'm in, I realized that what is on my sewing table always are my thoughts. I'm always thinking about the projects that I'm working on. I think about videos that I think will be helpful. I think about the comments that you guys are so faithful to make and how kind you are, and that interaction that we have together and how life-giving it is to me. And then while I was really not feeling well, I was not taken totally down with the dreaded virus, but I was just not well enough to not be able to engage. And so I just kind of tuned out and sewed a lot. And I realized sewing and quilting and making for many of us is a place to process our thoughts and feelings and worries. And I actually even commented to my friend Jennifer, how would I get through life if I couldn't have handiwork, if I couldn't have quilting or crocheting or knitting or whatever? Maybe you have other projects as well. And it reminds me of the author that said, if I didn't write, how would I know what I think? And I thought, if I didn't sew, how would I know what I think? So I want to show you some projects that I'm working on and talk about what I think about them, and show you some lessons that I've learned. And I hope that it will catch you up to speed with me on my sewing table. So give me just a sec. Let me get my stuff out and then we'll do it. In my previous On My Sewing Table video, I talked about how I let myself get encouraged into making a Christmas quilt. And if you're wondering how that was going, you can see the progress behind me. So it will be done for next Christmas, hopefully. So I'm still working on it. Won't get into that today, but I did want to show you. This is the pattern by Quilty Love. Her name is Emily Dennis. And this was the original block. So I was going to refresh you. This was the original block. And then I made another one that I talked about in that video, and that was this one. And I had enjoyed making these two blocks so much that now I am full-fledged all the way in. And so as I encounter fabrics that I like, shirt fabrics particularly, and yokes and cuffs and small pieces that are really compelling, I'm just making a block as it goes. And I will tell you that I have a little bit of once I kind of get an idea, I have to work against the obsession of it. And so after I did these two, which are largely blue in the star, I thought, ooh, I think a gray one could be really pretty. And so I gathered my gray print fabrics, and now I've made another one. So I'm going to get that out for you and show you that and talk about my frustrations. So here's the newest one, and some of these fabrics I just adore. I think they're so interesting. There's one that looks like houndstooth from a distance, but if you look up close, it is actually made up of little tiny X's like cross stitch, which I find really fun. This one on these triangles is a kind of interesting, almost snowflake pattern. These are the little pineapples from the shirt. If you saw that thrift haul, it's white with black pineapples on it. And then this last one was a plaid shirt that I just really, really liked. So it's gray with a very thin navy line through it. And I kind of had those four and then was trying to figure out what to put around the center. And so I incorporated this blue floral, blue floral. This was from a denim and flower shirt that had that fun yoke in it. And then I wanted a little something else that had some contrast. And so I used this black and white stripe that came from the yoke of a shirt, and then this tattersall that I have actually used in a totally other quilt project. And I actually really love it. It's very, very neutral. Unlike the two previous blocks that have, like this paisley, for example, is just very contrasty. And even the little turquoise dots here is very contrasty. Whereas, is that a word? Contrasty? Has a lot of contrast. This block does not have a lot of contrast. The most contrast, besides the navy to the actual triangles and squares, are these three. And I love it. I think it's great. And then I put a picture of it on Instagram and then saw it from a distance. And this little tiny block right there, one of the black stripes lines right up against that navy. And so it looks like that navy block is not squared exactly right. And also, because it's the darkest one, it is the most contrast, and it kind of sticks out a little bit. I don't want to say like a sore thumb, but it definitely has more contrast than the rest. So as I've continued to look at this block, I do love it. Moving forward into other blocks that I will continue to add to, I will approach this ring of squares around that square a little differently. So I'll probably try not to have a dark, hard line up against it. And then looking at it again with new eyes, I would probably put another contrasting fabric on this side of the square. So this side of the square has a contrast, this one does, this side doesn't. So it really could benefit right here between these two blocks with something a little more contrasting to kind of anchor that side of the block, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, this is just a sea of low volume gray. And again, I think once it's all done, it's going to be beautiful. And I'm not going to go, oh man. But I have noticed it. And I think it's funny how sometimes when you see it up close and you're studying it, it has one feel. But then when you get away from it, and that's the benefit of putting something down on the floor and standing on a chair, or putting it on your bed and getting to the edge of your room so you can see what that looks like from a distance. In this case, it just happened that was via a photo on Instagram. This is so me. It almost looked like a tongue sticking out, like that. I'm serious. That's what I thought. Like when I saw the picture on Instagram, that's exactly what I thought. Like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, it looks like it's going, So anyway, that's kind of silly, but that is my addition to the Quilty Stars quilt. So this is, I guess I'm a full-fledged quilter now. I have a project that will be a very long-range project, and I'm just kind of trying to add to it and just make a block when I can. It is very tempting for me to just jump in and try to do a whole bunch of these all at one time. I think it's pretty and it rewards that in me. So it's that when you get excited about something and you have energy for it, and then it turns out like you like, and so then that gives you more energy for it, and so then you want to go make another one, and which is fantastic, but I have not collected all of the necessary fabrics to do it well. So there's that tension of, I want to spend all my time. Like, can I get paid to make these navy blocks? Can I get paid to make these navy blocks? Because I would do this as my job. But just because I have energy for it does not mean that that's what I need to spend my energy on. And until I have the right fabrics, I might make another block and then be frustrated. So, boy, isn't that the tension of being a creator or maker, or, having a vision, balancing that I have all of this and it's rewarded because I think they're pretty. And every time I make one, my husband's like, ooh. So I get the reward from him too. So just knowing that and trying to balance that with other projects that I have going on and not neglecting them and them becoming now something that I don't want to spend my energy on. So that's probably enough about that. I'm gonna put this away, get out my real project that I'm working on right now. So this is what is really on my sewing table right now. And it is my 9-patch trip around the world quilt that I am working on. And I cannot tell you how much joy this is giving me. It is fun for me every step, cutting the fabric, stitching it together, then stitching the blocks together. And I just, oh my goodness, I just I think it is so pretty. But there are some things that of course, that I'm learning while I'm working on it because I'm always thinking while I'm sewing. And let me just tell you, I think thoughtfulness while quilting is always rewarded. I think the more thoughtful you are about the decisions that you're making, your actual sewing, pressing, it always pays off. It 11-fold. I don't know where I got 11-fold from. Just whatever thoughtfulness you have about piecing and stitching and pressing just shows in the end results. Where I have started is I started with a 9-patch in the very center. This is obviously just one quadrant of it with this yellow. And so it goes from a 9-patch with the 5 solid pieces. And then next to it is a 9-patch with the solid pieces are the opposite and so on and so forth. So it's really just a checkerboard, but it's been pieced together by 9 patches. One of the things I've learned about this is when you do a 9-patch, it feels, because it's symmetrical all the way around, it does not feel directional. It feels like no matter what you do with it, and really that's true. If you turn it, if I took one of these and turned it on every, 90 degrees, it is the same block. But once you have pressed your seams a certain direction, it becomes directional. And I did not think about that in the beginning. I actually did initially think about it. So my blocks that start with, I call this a 5 block and this is a 4 block. So the one that has 5 colored pieces, I call a 5 block. And the block that has the 4 color pieces, I call that a 4 block. So I know it's a 9-patch, but for my purposes. So what I decided from the beginning, I'd press the seam toward the left. And then all of this to the left. And then if it starts with the light color, I would press that to the right. And then so on and so forth, which is fantastic and works because if you do that consistently, and I don't know why I'm pointing this direction because I guess just because, but if I press this seam toward this dark and this seam toward this dark, and then press this the opposite and this one the opposite, it's going to nest every seam. And it does, if you remember to keep your block turned the right way. And of course, wouldn't you know, the block that I got turned around, the blocks, plural, that got turned around the wrong way were the orange linen. Why? Linen is tricky enough as it is. When I was piecing it together, I just flaked and didn't think, oh gosh, if I get this block turned upside down or turned one rotation, it's not going to nest right because it's in concentric diamonds. So that ring, every one that I did it the wrong way on impacts the next ring. So I've learned to be very thoughtful in my piecing and in my pressing. And when I get done with the block, I stack them all directionally with the seams pressed the right way. So again, I hope everybody tracked with that. My 5 block, I press that first row to the left, second row to the right, third row to the left. And then that way, when I do this block, it will go the opposite. This one goes this way, and they will all nest. And so now I have learned in this process, as I'm making these blocks, these 9 patch blocks, I press them consistently the same direction, and then I keep them stacked that way. Once I get this row attached to this row, I press down. And then on the 4 block, I press, when I get this row attached to this row, I press up. So even those seams will nest as well. So that has been a very good learning experience for me, because I'm not following someone's pattern, because it's 9 patch blocks. So I'm literally learning as I go. So I have, in this process, come to have a immense respect for quilt designers, quilt pattern designers, and pattern testing. So you think, oh, I mean, how hard is it? Oh, well, the devil is in the details. So just recognizing once I get impressed a certain way, then keeping them that way and moving forward. The other thing that I have learned in this process is typically I like to do all the blocks of one color. So I haven't done a lot of big block quilts or block-based quilts. I'm starting to now. But I'll do all of the purple and then all of the turquoise and then and that way I have a sense of accomplishment, and I'm working with one set of fabrics at a time. And then at the end, then piece them all together. But I wanted to piece it all together as I went, just so I could make sure that it was tracking the way I wanted it to. And from working with it on my design wall, which is going to be far too small to handle this, I just started with that first ring, and then I did the next 4 and so on. But because it's diagonal rings, I have to do the center color, the next color, and the next color in order to go in and attach it. Now, if I was like a normal person and just sewed all of the 9 patches and then had them all stacked up on my sewing table or on my dining room table or whatever, and then sat down and laid them all out and sewed them all together, I probably wouldn't have this problem. So maybe that's a lesson in itself. But I knew that this was going to be a big undertaking, and I can lose momentum on a project when I don't see it come together. And because it's just 9 patch blocks, getting one block done is not like, whoo, it's not super rewarding. I want to see it all come together, and I don't want to get lost in the tediousness of doing the same 9 patch blocks over and over again, if that makes sense. So what I have discovered is that if I'm going to do it this way, then I have to actually think the block that I'm on and the block that's above it and the block that's to the right or left of it and the block on the corner. That way, as I'm making this, you can see that as I'm making this, I'm just adding a row to the top and then a row to the bottom and then a row to the left and then a row to the right. And so what that means is that I'm working with 2 or 3 blocks out, if that makes sense. And honestly, in a way, that's kind of its own reward as well, because just about the time I think I'm tired of working with this hot pink, now I've got this lipstick burgundy and then this nice plum that has this pattern that I love. And then now I'm in a navy. So that's really exciting, and has been such a great learning experience. I also wanted to share with you guys, I don't know if you've had this experience. I am working with background fabric that I already had. I had a fair amount of yardage of just kind of neutral, not totally white, but some of them white with a pattern, some of them slightly cream with a white design on top of it. And so I started with the center with the lightest, Then I did those blocks, and then I did the next blocks. And then I knew this was going to happen. At some point, you run out of that fabric. And I did not want to go really buy yardage. I may have to, but I wanted to use up what I had in kind of that same practical, I'm not Midwestern, but that Midwestern, use what you have. Let's not go blow a whole bunch of excess when you have perfectly good fabric that you can work with. That's also Southern, by the way. I don't know why I went with Midwestern, but you Midwesterners, you know what I'm talking about. And so then it becomes, how do you use what you have thoughtfully so that it doesn't look slapdash in the end result? So this is the center, and this white fabric is the same as this one, is the same as this one. But once we start getting to this kind of lovely hot pink color, I used all that fabric up. And so what I did is, as we're working out, well, there's no we, me and the mouse in my pocket are sewing this quilt. As I started working out, once I realized that I was not going to have enough of this white fabric, but enough still left over, what I did is the new fabric I incorporated in the corners, if that makes sense. So this pink fabric, or this white fabric next to the pink, will become the corner of that ring. But I still had some of this other white, and I wedged that in. So as it works out, when it goes to a new white, I use it at the corners first. And then the middle pieces will have that leftover. So the solid colors are a gradient, but so is the white. And it integrates into each other through the middle, and then the corners anchor the next background fabric. That's a long explanation, but I do think in the end result that it will make it look thoughtful, and even though it is scrappy, it won't feel as scrappy. So that's that. I do want to show you the rest of the colorway because I think that is fun. And yeah, so let me get that. So I'm back. This is the center of the quilt. As I work out, it's going to go into dark blue and then lighter. So this is this color you can see, and then this is the next, and then of course the navy. And then from there, I'm going to go, so navy, and then this kind of could be navy, could be black. It's like when you leave leftovers in the fridge. Could be meat, could be cake, who knows? Could be navy, could be black. And then from there, it's going to get lighter again into this really, really interesting, almost like wallpaper, light blue. And then from that to turquoise to kind of a grass green. And then to this really busy print that is a mixture of a lot of greens, and then ultimately ending up at this very dark green. So it's going to do the whole color of the rainbow, start out light, go dark, get lighter, and then end up with the edges, just this one little probably block in that color. And I am so excited about it. I cannot even tell you. So that's what's on my sewing table right now, along with several other things that I won't get into today. That'll be maybe for another on my sewing table. And I'm just chipping away at it. I have seen a lot of people talk about making 9-patch blocks more efficient by doing strips, sewing strips together, and then cutting them to make, so you make the squares by cutting as opposed to sewing individual squares together. And I think that is so great, and it does not work for me. I'm not probably doing it as efficiently or as quick, but I do remind myself quilting is slow. Quilting is a slow craft. And if I want to do squares together so that they're nice and neat and precise and line up not neatly, then that's the quilting process that works for me. So if you're out there and you're watching these reels and videos that say, do this more efficiently, sew these strips together and then cut this and then sew that, and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for me either. So if you're a square to square to square sewer just like me, my heart is with you, and we have to make the process that works for us. So I guess that's it. That's what's on my sewing table for today's video. I hope it's been an encouragement to you as you are working on your own projects, to consider what you're working on and think about it as you're working on it and process your life. If you do like I do, every time that foot pedal goes, so do my thoughts. And I'm glad to be back with you. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday, and I am looking for a brand new year with you here on the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. Thanks for watching.